culture really shows up when the pressure hits. It's not at a town hall. It's not in a communication. It's when the pressure hits.
Hi, my name is Glaze.
And my name is Jazzy. Welcome to Let's Table That. Today we have a heavy hitter in the studio. Teresa Vozza is an executive coach, fractional CHRO, and former corporate executive. We are really excited to have her here today to unpack a topic not talked about enough.
The executive whisperer of C-suite. We're skipping the basic HR rulebook and digging into the psychological masks executives have to wear and how to protect your soul while climbing to the top.
I think we greatly underestimate the limelight that you are under when you're in the C-suite or when you're at a senior level position. You are scrutinized. Every gesture that you make, everything that you say in front of others, every communication that you put out, you are just under intense scrutiny.
Let's welcome Teresa to the group chat.
Teresa, welcome to the podcast. We're really happy to have you here today. So we'd love to understand a little bit more about your background for anyone that maybe that doesn't know. If you want to share anything?
Sure. And thank you for having me. It's fun to be here. So my background is I was a chief HR officer in working for corporate HR for the last, I would say, 22 years prior to starting my own business in 2020. My background predominantly is in human resources, communications, learning and development, and change management. Those were the areas I played in when I was in corporate HR. And over the last 5 years, I've been working with primarily executive teams on everything from team strategy, team coaching and facilitation, as well as an executive coaching advisory to CEOs and the C-suite as a big part of my company. And it's been very illuminating and fun throughout the time. Yeah.
Love that. Did you think you were going to get into this when you were early on in your career?
No, not at all. I almost think I was an entrepreneur by accident. I never thought I had the DNA of an entrepreneur, even though my father was, and even though my brother is. But I always saw myself as a 9-to-5 corporate identity. And honestly, for a long time, that's what served me, and I learned so much from it. But no, I think I came upon it much like I think many have during COVID, when we had that great reawakening, if you will, around what our second curve of life was going to be like. And I've just saw so much within the executive sphere that I didn't like, and I've always had an inkling that we could do differently, and that's what spawned the idea to start running my own company.
Nice.
What was the switch for you? Was there like an aha moment?
Yeah, I do. I think I had been around so many executive offsites. I've been part of so many executive trainings and leadership development trainings. And I always walked away thinking that there was something left on the table. And the truth is that there was. It was everything that was not being said. And I could see it. I could see it through exchanged looks at the boardroom table. I could see it in Teams notes that would go pinging throughout an offsite. And we never really got down to what the core dysfunctions were. And I think that's what spawned the idea of, wouldn't it be cool to run a business working with teams where we did actually table the tough conversations? We did actually have a vehicle to say the truth, because transparency is magnetic. And once you create it, then so many conversations flourish from that fact. And so that's what spawned the idea that I wanted to create advisory and executive coaching and team strategy based on telling the truth and unearthing what was at the core of some of our performance issues within companies, people issues, productivity issues, you name it, all of it. And I think that's the key, is figuring out what's not being said, the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the real stuff, which
The
is
real
what
deal.
people want.
Real deal.
And is it pronounced Crucible, your
Yes.
company?
Yes.
So if someone's interested in executive coaching, how does your process work?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, so Crucible, we are an executive advisory and leadership development company. So we do two things primarily, and we do them both really well. But generally, how it looks like is that someone will come to me presenting a pain point, whether it's within a team or whether it's individually based. And we spend some time getting to know the client, the pain point, what it is that they would like to get help on. And then I meet with them first, and then they get paired with an executive coach, whether it's myself or whether it's a member of my team, based on the issue at hand. Oftentimes it's executive readiness. They're newly promoted vice presidents or C-suite leaders, first time sitting at that table. There's a lot they don't know. And so part of it is succession planning, part of it is coaching for performance, and part of it is, and I don't do this, but addressing skill gaps. That would be more performance coaching, and I don't tend to do that style of coaching. We enhance and deepen what's already there. We're not corrective. So that would be the first thing we kind of filter through when we work with new executives.
Nice, that's attractive.
Yeah, yeah.
When you are new to a senior leader position, especially VPs, you're often not taught the leadership portion. You might know your craft that you're in, but so that's really helpful.
Yeah, because so often many executives get promoted into these roles based on skill and based on capability, but very little attention is given to their relational power, their emotional intelligence, their ability to build great leaders. That oftentimes is is ignored, to be honest. And so then executive coaching comes in to help augment. It's part of their 90-day or their 6-month plan is work with an executive coach, develop the skills, the capabilities, but also the language and the communication and all of those leadership principles that will help you be successful.
And do most organizations that you work with, is this sort of like part of that person's development plan? So as soon as they step into it, you come in and you kind of go through the coaching and advisory with them?
Yeah, primarily that's exactly it. I will work with a CEO's senior executive team. So for example, they promoted 3 different leaders. A couple might be in the C-suite, some might be at the VP, AVP level. And as part of their onboarding, they also have an executive coach, access to an executive coach for 6 months, where we do a 360 and we have stakeholder interviews and we create coaching goals based on the areas of development that are key to that role, but maybe more on the performance side. I call it performance multipliers, not soft skills, because I think soft skills just gets a bad rap, but those behavioral characteristics that will enable you to be successful and produce more, reduce friction, create alignment, build influence. Those are the kinds of skills that I would help an executive build in that first 6 months to 12 months.
Do you use any assessments? Do you have any tools in place within your company as well that you use to help you with that?
Yeah, my favorite is, there's so many 360 assessments out there, but my favorite is Leadership Circle.
Oh, okay.
And it's a 360 assessment. I love it because it measures tendencies and not necessarily characteristics. It's your natural tendencies to be more reactive or to be more creative. And there's a series of different dimensions. And then it also tells you what it looks like to have those be an optimal state with clear examples. And I'm a big believer in being pragmatic. So not only is it important to teach the insight, but give them real life scenarios of how it actually plays out. Like, what does it look like in a board meeting? What does it look like, with the CEO? So that's why I prefer that assessment. It's just much more holistic.
Yes.
And we can create some really juicy goals as a result of it.
That's interesting. I think that's pretty similar to what I've used in the past. It's called Assess First. So it's like a radar chart, and you sort of like, depending on the model that you have for the specific model, you have 8 key traits for the specific role, and it just which behavior is expressed less often that you need to be successful in this role, and which
Mhm.
behavior that you need less often. And then where does that person kind of score
Yeah.
on that? And then that just means a high score doesn't mean great, and then a low score doesn't mean bad. It just means it's that person's natural tendency,
Yeah.
which actually creates for better, I would say, conversation, really
Yes.
helps you understand, gain better insight into the kind of person you are.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you're starting from a strengths-based
Mm-hmm.
lens as opposed to a deficit. And
Love
so
that.
that's what I
Yep.
mean around quote unquote performance coaching is sometimes we'll have someone come in and say, this person's on their last leg.
Mm.
And the last thing we're going to provide to them before we let them go potentially is executive coaching.
Mhm.
I would caution against that.
Mhm.
I almost always would decline those types of assignments because really what needs to be done is getting back to what we said earlier is what's the elephant in the room, what's left unsaid.
Mhm.
Let's start having those conversations to unearth what may be some performance problems. But executive coaching from a deficit standpoint is not effective.
Just thinking, I'm still back on that assessment because I think it's really.
And I like that too. I
Yeah.
like the tendency focused.
You mentioned dimension. So when you think about all of the coaches that you've coached or
Mhm.
executives, the executives that
Mhm.
you've coached, is there sort of like a common thread or common pattern with which dimension they need more
Yes.
coaching on?
Yes. First and foremost, systems awareness. It's always the one that is a
Interesting.
lower scored tendency because as new executives come into their role, they may have been taught to think very much based on their function or their department. And when you are moving into the C-suite or at that executive level, you can't get away with that anymore. You have to take a business lens and an enterprise lens. And so systems awareness, knowing how your actions, how your behaviors, how your performance impacts across all lines of business or across the entity at large,
Mhm.
that's something that a lot of leaders don't come in having right away. And so that's a tendency that is generally scored low. What I also see on the flip side is what tends to be scored high are things like agreeableness, compliance. Well, those are the very traits that can take you very far when you're moving up the ladder. But once you get to that VP C-suite level, you have to be okay with healthy debate and courage, managerial courage. And that's where that might be a high score, but we don't want you to be so agreeable. We want you to actually have a position and speak it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No, yes, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, man. What do you say would be the biggest difference when executives say what they want from their culture versus on what they actually do when the pressure is on?
So, yeah, the biggest thing I would say is culture really shows up when the pressure hits. It's not at a town hall. It's not in a communication.
Yes.
It's when the pressure hits. So once pressure hits, that's where you start to see what people are made of. And it's everything from what you are tolerating and letting slip by. That can include things like hiring managers that have been known to be toxic, but they're really good at what they do and ignoring that very real concern and saying, well, we'll hire them a coach, right? Again, I'm not knocking coaching. Executive coaching is what I do, but that's not the aim. So I think when pressure hits, I think we really grossly underestimate things like tone, nuance, body language, the things that are said in meetings, the things that are done in meetings that we just let slide. So I think it's when pressure hits that culture is really tolerated. It's not just running another program, values on a wall, any kind of initiative that gets rolled out. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Do you have a instance in the past where you've worked with an executive where that was, done really well, where there was pressure?
Yeah. Actually, I'm thinking of an example right now of a company I'm working with. It's a large company here in Ontario, and they come from a very kind of bureaucratic, rigid structure where culture was more imposed than it was actually created. And one of the things that we've been really actively doing is working on micro skills, like micro behaviors. And that's starting to really show its fruits. So, for example, everything from how to give feedback in a one-to-one, the way it was done in the past was very much like, tell me what you're doing, tell me your tasks, I'll tell you if you're doing them right or wrong. And we had to completely change even something as micro and small as how to give feedback in a one-to-one, or how to even actually have a one-to-one with a direct report. And so those are now just micro behaviors that are starting to shift at that supervisor director level. So that would be an example of where I'm seeing really effective change. Another example, I think, is just with respect to training and development. So there was another company out of the US that I was working with that really treated training and development as a nice to have, as something that was like basically a soft skill, just makes you a better person. And I'm so against that. I believe that soft skills need to be completely reframed as performance multipliers. And so as soon as we started talking about soft skills from the lens of increased productivity and reduced turnover, and really bringing in the operations, well, then those data-driven analytical minds that may be not paying a lot of attention to soft skills will listen. And by doing that, we created, like, I think it was a 12% increase in their leader engagement and their leaders' ability to motivate, train, and empower people. So things like that are culture builders, and those would be a couple of examples of success.
That sounds great. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, for your perception of soft skills being performance multipliers, do you see performance multipliers as innate to a person, or do you see them to be coachable?
A little bit of both. I think you will always come across people who have some innate skill in being able to relate to people. A lot of that is shaping how they were conditioned and shaped as a child or as a young adult. And you will have another big percentage of people who it's coachable. They may not have learned those skills from a conditioning lens or from how they were shaped. And so they don't come easy. So I'm a big believer in reframing these soft skills as potentially they're just skill deficits and they can be trained. And so we give them clear examples of how to train them. And we work with the DNA of the person. So if someone's coming at me with an innate skill, it may take shorter amount of time to get them up to speed and to get that positive feedback. If I'm working with someone that this is very new and very difficult, then we would start really small and we would look at things like, what's a 10% improvement in that behavior look like? Let's go out and practice it, come back, tell me how it went, and then we would build from there. And in often cases, even those small 10%, once accumulated, can make a big difference to how that leader is perceived because there is the intention behind it to be better. And I think, employees, people really appreciate that honest intent.
I think the opposite of honest is sometimes typical corporate politics that happen in the workplace. I know you've worked at big companies, corporations, sorry. So I'm just curious, what do you think is typical corporate politics that basically HR leaders have to play, but they don't want to?
That's a really good question. Well, number one, I'll say this. I think influence beats authority every time. I think that you can have the C-suite title, you can have the SVP title, you can have the EVP title. It means nothing if you don't understand how relationships work within the ecosystem, within the organizational structure. So I think first and foremost, the title doesn't matter as much. But what I will say is, I think one of the things that HR may get caught up in, especially in matrix organizations or highly structured organizations, is you have competing interests. You have what the the global company and the center of excellence, if they have them, might be asking for. And then you have what the local entity might be asking for. I've been part of that. I know what that tension is like. And so I think that's the line that can be really difficult for HR. And so I work with a lot of HR executives. And one of the things I always say to them is, your first and foremost skill to build is influence. It's that relational power. Know how information gets shared, know what's important to those who do make those big decisions, know who those people are, and be really specific about building association or allyship with those individuals, because those are the people that generally can influence how decisions get made. And I don't mean this in an inauthentic, schmoozy kind of way. I mean genuine interest. What is it that you want to gain? What's the benefit to the greater organization at large? It can't just be what's of benefit to you or to your local entity. And then build those influencing skills with those quote unquote power players, if you will. And that's where I would start with HR. It can be tough. I've been in that role. And one of the biggest things I learned was your power doesn't stop at the local level. So for example, if you think your CEO will go to bat for you, don't. I think what you need to do is build the skills to leverage those conversations with your global counterparts. And once you do so, you'll have more influence over how decisions get made.
Yeah, I really like that influence focus, because I think in order to also have influence on the person you're trying to have that relation with, you also have to understand their focus, their mission, to be able to even meet them halfway.
That's right. What do they care about?
Yeah, and that's how you'll match it.
Yeah, and I think that has to be sincere. And this is why I say it's not about being inauthentic. It's be sincere about what they care about. So for example, when I worked at Allianz, there was a global HR director, which is the equivalent of a global CHRO here in Canada. And what she was trying to build was very much at odds with Canada. Europe and Canada have very different ways of leading HR. And for quite some time, I would complain about it. Like, I can't move further. It's not my fault. And, quite honestly, I played the victim in all of this. And one of the things I learned really early on is that you will be miserable if you play that role of, well, there's nothing I can do. There's a lot you can do, but it requires the building of relationship, the building of personal power, and your ability to influence how decisions get made with clear business cases and ROI, but finding out what they care about and how you can meet them in the middle, like you said. That's how you build those relationships. But they take work and they take time, and not everyone likes that.
Yes, and a little bit of uncomfortableness too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You
only really learn and grow when you're uncomfortable, they say.
That's right.
Well, not they say, that's true, but
it's very true. I can attest to that.
Very true. When you think about women executives versus men or male executives, do you think there's a big difference with how women build and influence those relationships? Do they feel as if they're not at the same par as their male counterparts?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of women executives, and there's a couple things I would say about that. One is, I think biologically, we are wired to be very caring, very nurturing of relationships. And so we do have a tendency to err more on the side of compliance, or not even just compliance, but keeping things safe, keeping things free of conflict. And so as a result, what I will see with many of my female executives, more than I will with the male executives that I work with, is that they will approach influence or negotiation from a, if it's okay with you type of mentality versus a, here's what I need and this is why, and here's what it can do for you. You can tell the difference just by the two different approaches. And again, it's not a knock. It's just we are biologically wired to be more nurturing. Again, there's always exception, but that is something I see a lot. So it's, how do I work with the men executives to provide a bit more nurturing and care about how they ask for things? And working with my female executives, it might be about how to be more direct and clear about your ask, and focus less on making it personal and having it reflect on who they are as a person.
Mhm.
So those are two different kind of tones that I notice when I work with female executives versus male executives.
I can attest that I have actually worked on trying to care less about how my message comes off to that
Yes.
person. Because in my perspective, it was I don't want to come off sharp or rude or demanding.
Yeah.
But then I realized it's like I don't want to be on my tippy toes all the time.
Yeah.
I have to just say it.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a way to say things, but
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've been working on that actually, even through like Slack communications or
Yeah.
emails.
Yeah.
I don't need as many exclamation marks. Like even those things, like small
Yeah, exclamation
micro
marks.
things
Tone.
matter.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tone. And I oftentimes, when I work with executives, female executives, sometimes they'll send me their language and they'll send me like their speaking notes on a topic. And I hate to be that red pen, but I will act as their red pen to say, we don't need this type of language to start. We don't need to start with things like, this is just my opinion. We don't need, there's so many fillers and sentences that we add in there to reduce the fear of how we might be perceived. And so if we can reduce that language, then what ends up happening is you come across much more clear, you have a position. And again, I always say, like, we put in the reps. Does that come right away for everyone? No, you practice. You practice at the next one-to-one, your next board meeting, your next governance committee, whatever it is you have in front of you. That's the time to play. I always say to my clients, let's just play with this. Let's play with different language. Let's try going in and framing it this way. See how that feels on you. And then they come back and they often share that they felt very powerful or sometimes very uncomfortable. But almost always they start building their professional acumen and not so much continuing to build on those already abundant empathy and relationship building skills, because oftentimes those are already strong to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's always about a balance too. You never want to be on such the far left side, for example, left side being so sharp, because then nobody wants to work with those people. You kind of avoid speaking to Tom if he's like that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the simple things I often say is, let's not ever forget the concept of repair. I don't know how many of you, I know you have kids. I have kids as well. My son is 14 and my daughter is 13. And there's this beautiful concept called repair. When we make a mistake, so long as we can repair it immediately, the damage is not done, if you will. So that can look like anything like, hey, my tone may have come across a little sharp in the meeting. Was that how it came across? If so, let me apologize and share with you what I meant. So there's always opportunities to repair if we err too side on the left or we err too much on the right. So bringing in that concept of healthy repair, even in teams, I do this all the time with executive teams, is I give them the skills to repair. Here's a repair statement you can use. Here's how you can ensure your message gets across without sounding too sharp or abrasive, and ride that line. But if you mess up, don't worry about it. Just bring in that repair. And hey, I'm practicing this new skill. I realize in doing so that I may have been a bit too harsh.
Right.
Let me try that again.
Yeah.
That can go such a long way because it creates vulnerability and trust.
Yes, definitely. And I would respect that.
Yes, same. Yeah. I think also like feedback is a gift. In my own experience, if I'm ever trying to do something differently, if I have a new team or if I'm working with a new exec, because I'm on the talent acquisition side and I have to work with them, I always think about, hey, like, how was that? Like, where has that been kind of landing with you?
Yeah.
Versus like what you usually see with other people.
Yeah.
Or if I'm like new at a company, it's always nice to kind of like get an idea of what their feedback is like.
Yeah.
When you think about high performance leadership, in your experience, at what point does a high achiever leader actually, keep themselves back from actually getting to that next level?
As soon as you said that, I hope I don't digress, but when I think of high performance leadership, I think of, there's like a dark side of that DNA. And I know that one well, because when I became a vice president many, many years ago, I completely erred on the side of trying to prove myself, trying to get validation, over-indexing, overworking, perfectionism, and it landed me in a stretcher.
Yeah. Burnout too.
Being wheeled to St. Mike's.
Literally.
Literally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually wrote about it in Fast Company. And so I know that DNA really well. And so there's a dark side to that. And that's always something I channel, especially with my female executives who have more of a propensity towards that. That's a whole other conversation. What can really derail them is you can care so much about getting the approval and the validation that what you're doing is the right thing that you can lose. Well, one, you can lose yourself in physically and emotionally and mentally. But I think the other thing too is it's just not sustainable. You will end up being a leader that hates his or her job. If you are in analysis paralysis, if you are hyper-focused on delivering perfectly, if you are attuned to every look or eye roll or crossed arms in a board meeting, you will drive yourself crazy if you hold yourself to such a high standard. And that overdrive can actually hinder your ability to grow any further because people will feel like they're on pins and needles around you. Or because you become a micromanager and you can't build other great leaders because you're so hyper-focused on yourself and just being okay at your own level. So I think there's a lot of disadvantages to that as well. But I think what also holds high performers back is their tendency to want to please. And so if they're over-indexed on pleasing, then what ends up happening is they build in an agreeableness and just do what the CEO says or just do what the C-suite says without bringing in their own commercial insight, their own professional opinion, their own intelligence. And so we end up outsourcing our own wisdom and our own intellect and thought leadership to other people. And then you become known as someone that doesn't really have a strong opinion. You just go with what everybody else says. And I'm a big believer that at the C-suite especially, you have to be willing to take a stand on things, even at the risk of other people not agreeing with you. That's a muscle you have to build.
I think that's so true though, because I've seen it before where I think, to be blunt, if people are insecure with themselves in certain aspects, not necessarily your looks, but something to do with your character, it really does come out in the workforce where, like you said, they will, I feel sometimes if I've talked to a person that's kind of like this, they will hyperanalyze my facial reactions or my body language. And I felt like I had to kind of perform in reply to them so that they felt comfortable and can continue on. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. And one of the things I was trained in as part of my practice was trauma-informed coaching. And I know a lot of people are really uncomfortable with the word trauma, like they automatically think of something really horrific, and it can be, but oftentimes it could be microaggressions as well. But one of the things I learned with my trauma-informed training is that so often you are dealing with people across from you who come at their leadership with their own stories, with their own quote unquote, for lack of a better word, wounds and inability or skill deficits, to the term I used earlier. And so we need to also understand that we often react from a place of how we are shaped. And so when we understand that, it creates a moment of pause and being able to choose your response. But the reason it's so important is because in your example as well, you become so uncomfortable around people who are unable to self-regulate.
Yes.
And that's a skill that at the executive leadership table, if you don't understand self-regulation, then it's a short runway, because that is something you have to know and understand throughout your executive career, whether you've come from trauma or not. Self-regulation skills, I would say it's a modern day, I wouldn't say dilemma, but it's a modern day must for executive leadership and for human potential.
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
I always find regulation and then just emotional intelligence. It's so key. And it amazes me how, I guess, not everyone has certain cues to realize what that could mean or how that can come off.
And that can quickly become very toxic.
Yes.
Especially if you have an executive who doesn't see it that way.
That's
and
right.
Exactly.
This
That's
is how and then other executives are allowing it to be that way. That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in those organizations before.
Too. Yeah, me too. And that too is, again, there's no blame to be thrown around. Number one, CEOs and leadership teams don't have the language or the understanding of what might be happening. So they then form an opinion. And, the most popular opinion is that they're a problem employee, or that they are, incapable of handling the pressure. And then the individuals themselves also are not to blame because they are unaware of the patterns that are driving their behavior. And so that's why I'm such a big fan of trauma-based type of coaching and interventions, if you will, because they actually provide that psychoeducational insight that is so key to self-regulation and makes for a much more high-functioning team or relationship. And again, when I go into companies, I don't often use the word trauma, but I use the skills. I know what skills to use, but as soon as you bring out the word trauma, people get a little bit afraid, which is really a shame.
Yeah, I guess to be vulnerable, I guess it has to tap into that part for them.
It can,
right?
It can, but always from a place of safety. We never go anywhere where the client doesn't want us to go. Yeah, it's only if it's in service to them and if it's holding them back. And again, we're not therapists, so we don't diagnose. So very clear, it's about strategies in the workplace to manage things like triggers and so on.
So I know you came into different companies seeing different cultures and what's going right, what's going wrong. What would you say at the leadership level as an outsider, some things that the leadership level is blind to, but you can see it being external?
I'll echo something I said earlier in the interview, which I think was, it's what's not being said. It's what's left unsaid. So what I mean by that is, I think we greatly underestimate the limelight that you are under when you're in the C-suite or when you're at a senior level position. You are scrutinized. Every gesture that you make, everything that you say in front of others, every communication that you put out, you are just under intense scrutiny. And so I think that is a pressure and a blind spot that if leaders are not aware of their own psychology and how they come across both in front of people or behind closed doors, that's a significant blind spot. A quick example I'll give you. Many years ago when I was the VP of HR, this is early days, I remember having to present at a town hall, an HR update, and I had a question from the audience around whether or not Allianz at the time was going to respect the whole living wage. Do we offer a living wage? And it took me a moment to answer the question because I was thinking about when and if we did it at a certain date. But that pause was completely scrutinized, so much so that after the fact, they made mention of it. Oh, even the CHRO, or at the time I was VP, even the VP of HR isn't sure that we have a living wage. What does this have to say about our call center employees that don't have, the wage that is going to afford them a cost of living? And it was simply just a pause and a falter in my delivery. And I remember thinking after the fact, I remember getting really emotional about it because I was like, that was not my intent. But I was unaware of just how much scrutiny happens at that level. And the CEO at the time said to me, Teresa, don't worry about it. This is part of working at this level. My only advice would be for you to just be aware that these are the types of things that people will look at. And so now when I work with executives too, we do a lot of work on tone, gestures, how you come across at a meeting, leaders speaking last, all of those things that set tone and culture because you're being read all the time.
And I think my question to that is, how do you perceive when people do hold before they answer? Because I know sometimes I've been told you can pause if you need before. Because sometimes if I were to get nervous, I might ramble or say stuff that I don't mean. So I need to pause and collect.
Yeah.
But I understand what you mean in that type of scenario.
Yeah, I would say this. A purposeful pause is very powerful. A pause where you are looking like or appearing like you're trying to figure out what to say next because you don't know the answer, which in fact I think was more what happened with me, because I had to think, did we put that in place? To be honest with you, that came across as she doesn't know. Whereas a purposeful pause comes across as intelligent. Let me give that a minute. I want to give you an answer that I can stand behind. Like if I were to say that, give me a minute. I want to make sure I'm answering this question intentionally and honestly, and then go to my answer, would have looked very different.
Right.
So being purposeful is very different than thinking or appearing to look like you're either going to make something up or trying to remember if and when you did something. Again, we are not infallible humans. So I say that, one, for compassion for my young VP self, but also for anyone out there, listeners, who like, oh, I've done that. It's okay. It's just, let's bring that insight into awareness. And once it's in awareness, we can work with it.
And we have repair.
And we have repair.
I was just thinking that. I was like, repair. I didn't want to.
And repair to yourself, because, you know, you can be really hard
you have to
on
give yourself grace.
Yes. Self-compassion
I'm
here.
so hard on myself after public speakings or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if we can look at corporate culture and when we think about global culture, is it actually possible to have a unified culture in a company with thousands of people, or is that just sort of a myth for HR?
Yeah, no, I think it's entirely possible to have a number of subcultures within a large organization. I don't think the goal here is to be exactly the same. I think the goal here is you can have shared principles, but I think what we're really looking for here is coherence. We're looking for the essence of how we do things in this company is same. How we might go about it may look different. Every team in a company has different shared histories, like team histories. They have different people with different psychological makeups, different styles of leadership. So no, I think it's entirely possible to have subcultures all working towards the same thing. I think it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to have one unified culture in a large global company. I think more often than not, it's subcultures, but when you do it right, you have the same spine, if you will. The spine is somewhat the same, just how you go about leading and sharing and creating and implementing may look different based on the psychology of the people within that team.
That's great. What do you think are the first signs or telltale signs that, that culture is sort of fracturing?
Yeah. I think first and foremost is when you start to see a lot of friction and things like implementation launch delays, increased risk of burnout, a lot of people going off on leave would be another example. I think when we start to see results going down, performance is always an indicator of some type of friction. Oftentimes we go to, well, the skill deficit is the problem. We have the wrong talent. We have the wrong person. We hired the wrong person. Maybe, or we didn't coach them. We didn't onboard them. We didn't provide the right environment. We didn't teach them how to handle team dysfunction, how to agree. We didn't give the right feedback. We didn't give feedback. We were just talking earlier about giving feedback. Those are the things we should be diagnosing first, but quite often it's when we start to see turnover of our best performers, leaves, people burnt out and stressed, lower performance, failing to meet deadlines or implementations and projects, and anecdotally, just the water cooler talk. Just a lot of that chip, 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 chip that you see oftentimes start to happen. And what I've seen is you'll be in a team meeting and you'll see people looking at each other when someone's talking. You'll see like silence, nobody talking, there's no communication. There's so many telltale signs. And often, again, I'll go back to what is not being said. What is left unsaid? You unearth that, you will unearth performance problems and performance and dysfunction and all of the things that need to be unearthed in order to get back to a place of productivity.
In terms of perceiving silence, I'm just curious your thoughts on this, because
Yeah.
sometimes I think if a message is relayed very clearly and well, there might be silence in terms of the people absorbing and like recognizing what's being said. But then to your point, and I've seen this too, where the silence is because there's things unspoken that they don't want to say. Can you differentiate as a leader speaking what type of silence you're seeing?
Yeah. So I would say, first and foremost, there's energy in a room. And as someone who does a lot of work in front of groups and in front of executive teams, I'm probably more highly attuned to energy in the room than maybe the average person might be. And so one of the things I look for is the energy. And so if silence is a result of the energy of a room where people are leaning forward and intently listening and nodding, I might tend to be, okay, I think the energy is good, but I will always ask the question. And oftentimes I'll do energy checks or I'll do trust checks, like, 1 to 10, where are you and why? And I'll almost like make sure that I'm asking the question before assuming that silence is agreement. So I think that's one thing, and there's ways we can do that. If silence is this, or leaning back, or body language and tone is very grim or not for, and again, that there's always nuance to that. Right. Some people just have natural demeanor, so you never want to make assumptions. But I will then sometimes say, Glaze, you haven't heard from you in a while. What do you think about that? And I will bring it out, because it's better to bring out at least 1 or 2 people than to hear nothing and then move on. So for example, as a facilitator, you always want to confirm understanding. Are we ready to move on? Is there anything left unsaid? And sometimes what I'll do is I'll have guiding principles, and I'll say, before we move on, we want to ensure that we've heard from all of you. So you build those kind of agreements inside the design.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about this, but we have a segment called Under the Table. And we basically ask all of our guests to just choose a random question. The questions are a little bit more spicy than the typical ones we went through. Whatever you want to share, it's welcomed. So go ahead.
Spicy. Okay.
Spicy question, spicy answer.
What's an assumption people make about scaling teams that usually backfires? Ooh, good question. Put that right in front of me. What's an assumption people make about scaling teams that usually backfires? I would say one of the assumptions that people make is that they overhire. And so rather than spend the time coaching, training, and developing the people in role and really giving them the opportunity to develop and quote unquote do more, I've tended to see that we tend to go to resources. We have to hire more people because we need someone who has skill in X. And so what ends up happening is that we sometimes overhire and we stop the actual coaching, training, developing, upgrading of the talent that we do have. I think that's an assumption people make. I'll add one more. Another assumption that usually backfires is that once we have more people, we will get the work done or it'll be successful. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, what ends up happening is you hire more people and you negate the team unity, the bonding, the vision that you're aiming towards, what's important. We don't spend any time doing that. We're just focused on getting tasks done or getting things off the table. That usually backfires. If you're going to scale a team, you have to ensure that they are buying into a vision of what you are trying to build and why and what's in it for them and how you will support them. If not, then you're just hiring a lot of people who are left going, what am I supposed to be doing? I thought I was hired for this, but now I'm doing that. It just breeds mass confusion. And I have a company right now that's exactly what's happening. They're scaling rapidly. They're hiring all these people, but all these people are saying to me confidentially, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
There's a lack of vision.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
Yeah.
What I've done in the past is if I've, let's say, interviewed for a role, I like to ask different leaders what their vision is for the company. And if there's competing or different versions of that vision, that's a telltale sign that they're not all on the same bus or train, I guess. So even if you are internal, you could totally do that too.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've done in the past. I love that.
Yeah.
You answered that question.
Well, I love that too, because I think as we scale teams, we should always be doing check-ins. We should always be doing check-ins around, are we clear on what we're trying to build? What's left unsaid? What questions do you have? Like creating that psychological safety and trust will make it more effective. But to think that you just do it once and then off you go and everyone do their job, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
When you're scaling a team, you need to meet with them regularly and as a team reiterate the vision that we're creating and the mission and what we're doing and what support they might need. It's a dialogue. It's not a one-off.
Yeah.
The more buy-in, the more productive, the more of the unity with the teams.
Yeah, more excitement.
Yes.
Because they're part of it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a fruitful 1 hour with you.
Yeah, this was great.
We'd love to have you back again whenever you'd like. But thank you so much, Teresa.
Well, thank you both. You guys were great.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.